If this story moved you, I'd love to know. Where in the world are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments and let's see how far this story has traveled. Your thoughts mean more than you know, so feel free to share what part of the story touched you most. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because tomorrow's story is one you won't want to miss. Another moment, another heart, another journey begins. And it just might be the one that speaks to you. She said, "You're in my dad's wallet." He wasn't ready for what came next. Mark Taylor's Sunday mornings always started the same way. By 6:30 a.m. he was up, lacing his Nikes, and stepping out onto the quiet streets of Oak Ridge Hills, a gated community nestled just outside San Diego. The sidewalks were lined with palm trees, and the air still carried a trace of ocean breeze. At 48, Mark was in great shape, a reflection of his discipline and obsession with control. He was the CEO of one of the fastest-growing tech companies in the country, his net worth well into the tens of millions. But none of that mattered during his morning run. For those 3 miles, Mark wasn't the billionaire in the boardroom or the man with a 10,000-square-foot mansion. He was just a man chasing silence, running from the gnawing emptiness that all the wealth in the world couldn't seem to touch. He was lost in thought, feet pounding rhythmically on the pavement, when a small voice pulled him sharply back into ghee. The moment, "I know you, your picture is in my dad's wallet." Mark skidded to a stop, his breath catching not from the run but from the words. He turned, blinking in the golden morning light. Standing on the sidewalk behind him was a little girl, no older than 7, with chestnut hair tied in 2 loose braids. She wore a simple t-shirt and jeans, and her sneakers looked a size too big. Her eyes were wide, curious, and impossibly familiar. Mark crouched down slightly, steadying his voice. "What did you say?" The girl smiled. "You're the man in my dad's wallet. I've seen your picture before." His pulse quickened. He stared at her, trying to make sense of what she had just said. Who was her father? And why would he be carrying a photo of Mark? It didn't add up. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Emma," she replied without hesitation. "Do you want to come meet my dad? He's home right now." Mark hesitated. Everything in his logical mind screamed caution. But there was something about Emma, something in her face, her confidence, her ease that pulled him in. "All right," he said after a long pause. "Lead the way." As they walked, the manicured lawns and luxury homes of Oak Ridge faded into more modest streets, then into rows of apartment buildings. Mark's jogs had never taken him this far. But Emma walked like she belonged, waving at neighbors, skipping over sidewalk cracks like she'd done it 100 times. Finally, they reached a small building with chipped paint and a crooked mailbox. Emma led him to apartment 2B and knocked. Twice. The door creaked open, and standing there with a stunned look and familiar eyes was a man Mark hadn't seen in over 12 years, his voice caught in his throat. "Jake." The man's jaw clenched. His expression was a mix of shock, emotion, and something else, something heavier. "Mark," he whispered. "Is it really you?" And just like that, the past came rushing back. For a moment, neither of them moved. Mark stood frozen at the doorway, heart pounding in his chest. Jake, his younger brother, looked older than Mark remembered. His face was thinner, his hair a bit grayer, and his eyes carried a weight that only life could place there. But it was him. No doubt. Jake blinked, stepped back slowly, and opened the door wider. "Come in," he said, voice low, uncertain. Mark nodded, stepping inside the modest 2-bedroom apartment. It smelled faintly of coffee and cinnamon toast. The floors were worn but clean, and the furniture was simple, well used but cared for. Emma kicked off her sneakers and ran inside, humming as if nothing unusual had happened. Mark glanced around and saw family photos on the wall. One caught his eye, a picture of Jake holding a newborn baby clearly taken years ago. Emma, that tiny bundle had become the little girl who led him here. "Have a seat," Jake said, pointing to the couch. "Thanks." Mark sat, awkwardly rubbing his hands together. I didn't expect this." Jake gave a soft, almost bitter laugh. "Yeah, me neither." The silence between them was thick, 12 years thick. Mark finally spoke. "She's incredible. Emma, She looks so much like you did when we were kids. Jake smiled faintly, then looked away. She's the best thing that ever happened to me. Mark hesitated, then asked the question that had been sitting heavy on his chest since the photo comment. Why do you have a picture of me in your wallet? Jake didn't answer right away. He walked to the kitchen, poured 2 mugs of coffee and came back handing one to Mark. Because, Jake said quietly, sitting down across from him, I didn't want to forget you. As mad as I was, I still missed you. Mark looked down at the mug in his hands. Guilt washed over him. I should have reached out, he admitted. I thought about it a lot, but the longer I waited, the harder it got. Jake nodded slowly. Yeah, that's how it goes. A beat passed. Mark cleared his throat. I heard about Lisa, he said gently. Jake's face tensed. He nodded once. 3 years ago, car accident. One moment she was there, the next gone. Emma was 4. Mark exhaled, devastated. I'm so sorry. I managed, Jake said, his voice rougher now. Because I had to. For her. Silence returned, heavier this time. Mark looked at his brother. This man who had suffered so much, raised a child alone and somehow still stood tall. I want to fix things, Mark said suddenly. I don't know how, but I want to try. Jake studied him for a long moment. You can't fix the past, Mark. I know, Mark replied, but maybe we could do something about the future. And in that small apartment, over 2 mugs of coffee and a decade's worth of silence, something began to shift. Not a clean slate, but the first line of something new. The next weekend, Jake and Emma stood outside the tall iron gates of Mark's estate. Emma's eyes widened as she took in the size of the house. 3 stories, floor-to-ceiling windows, a perfectly manicured lawn, and a stone driveway wide enough to park 10 cars. She turned to her dad with a grin. It's like a castle. Jake shifted uncomfortably, tugging at the collar of his shirt. He'd dressed up a little, jeans without holes, a clean button-up, but he still felt out of place. This wasn't his world. It never had been. The front door opened before he could second-guess himself. Mark stepped out, casual in jeans and a hoodie, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Glad you came. Thanks for having us, Jake said, his voice cautious. But sincere, Emma didn't wait for adult small talk. Uncle Mark, can I see the pool? Mark laughed. Of course, but how about a tour first? I've been waiting to show you both. Inside, the house was exactly what Jake expected. Massive, modern, spotless, marble floors, glass walls, smart everything. But what caught him off guard was how Mark looked at it all, like none of it really mattered. This place, Mark said quietly as they walked through the living room, used to feel impressive. Now it just feels empty. Jake glanced at his brother, surprised by the honesty. Emma was less concerned with emotions. She squealed when they reached the movie theater room, gasped at the built-in ice cream bar in the kitchen, and went completely speechless when they finally stepped out to the backyard, where the massive heated pool shimmered under the California sun. Best day ever, she declared. Jake and Mark sat by the edge of the pool as Emma played in the shallow end. There was a silence between them, but not the same kind as before. This one was easier, familiar. You've done well, Jake finally said, nodding toward the house. It's a lot. Mark looked around, then back at his brother. It is, but without anyone to share it with, it just echoes. Jake studied him for a moment. You sure you want us here? Mark didn't hesitate. More than anything. They grilled burgers that evening, ate on the patio under string lights Mark hadn't used in years. Emma talked non-stop about school cartoons and how she wanted to be a lifeguard, but only if the water's warm. For the first time in over a decade, the Taylor brothers laughed together. It wasn't forced or polite. It was real. As the sun dipped below the hills, painting the sky in soft oranges and pinks, Jake leaned back in his chair and said, This, feels weird. Mark raised a brow. Weird? Jake smiled. Yeah, like home. Mark didn't say anything. He didn't have to. because deep down he felt it too. And that night, for the first time in years, the mansion wasn't echoing. It was alive. It started with a drive through Jake's neighborhood. Mark hadn't meant to go that far, but after that weekend, after the laughter, the burgers, and Emma's endless curiosity, something shifted inside him. The streets near Jake's apartment looked different now. Not just worn down or lower income, they looked like home, real home. He passed by a faded brick building with a peeling sign that read, Oak Ridge Community Center. The lot was nearly empty. The paint on the windowsills was chipped. A group of kids kicked a soccer ball across a cracked parking lot. Mark slowed down and pulled over. Inside, the air was warm, but musty. The front desk was unattended. He followed the sound of voices and found a woman directing a handful of children in an after-school art class. Paper, markers, crayons, nothing fancy. When she saw him, she smiled, tired but kind. "Can I help you?" "I'm just looking," Mark replied. "This place, it used to be more active, didn't it?" The woman nodded. "Years ago. Budget cuts hit us hard. We're barely hanging on." Her name was Clara, the center's director. Passionate, sharp, and stretched too thin. She gave him a tour. Broken lockers, outdated computers, rooms that once held music lessons now used for storage. By the time Mark left, something had taken root in him. Later that night, sitting across from Jake on the patio while Emma drew pictures by the fire pit, Mark brought it up. "You ever think about what this place could be?" he asked. Jake looked up. "What do you mean?" "The community center. It used to be the heart of this neighborhood. What if we helped bring it back?" Jake raised an eyebrow. "We?" Mark leaned forward. "Not just a donation. I want to get involved, really involved. You know this community. I've got the resources. We could build something that matters." Jake was quiet for a moment, processing. "Mark, this isn't your world." "Maybe not," Mark said. "But it should be." Within days, Mark called Clara. They sat down with Jake and started mapping out a plan. Structural repairs, new programs, funding for teachers and equipment. Mark tapped into his network, brought in contractors, tech donors, even volunteer groups. But he didn't just write checks. He painted walls, built shelves, hauled boxes. On Saturdays, he showed up in jeans and sneakers, sweating alongside neighbors who barely knew his name, and it felt right. Emma helped too, organizing crayons, handing out snacks, reading to younger kids. She called it her center now. Mark didn't correct her. One evening, after hours of work, Clara looked at him with something close to disbelief. "How you could be anywhere," she said. "Why here?" Mark looked over at Jake, who was laughing with a group of teens by the basketball court, then at Emma, swinging from monkey bars. "Because for the first time," he said softly, "I feel like I belong." And in that moment, surrounded by chipped paint, tired walls, and genuine smiles, he truly did. The grand reopening of the Oak Ridge Community Center drew a crowd larger than anyone expected. Kids raced through the brand-new front doors, their laughter echoing in freshly painted halls. Parents stood back in awe, many of them walking through the building for the first time in years. The old walls were gone, literally and figuratively. In their place stood a space filled with life, color, and hope. Mark stood near the entrance, watching it all unfold with quiet amazement. Jake stood beside him, a clipboard in hand, directing volunteers with surprising ease. Clara, now a close friend, wiped away a tear as she welcomed guests. Emma, wearing a handmade name tag and a wide grin, gave out free popsicles like she ran the place. Maybe she did. Mark stepped up to the small stage they'd set up for the ceremony. The mic felt heavier than he expected. He looked out at the crowd, hundreds of faces, some familiar, many not, all connected by this moment. "I'm not here today as a businessman," he began, "or a donor. I'm here as someone who forgot, for a long time, what truly matters." He looked down at Emma in the front row. "This all started because a little girl recognized me. Her words brought me back to a brother I thought I'd lost, and a part of myself I hadn't seen in years." The audience was still hanging on his every word. "We built this place together. And what we built, it's more than walls or classrooms. It's a chance. For every kid who walks through those doors. For every parent who needs a safe space. For every neighbor who wants to believe again in what a community can be. When he stepped off the stage, the applause was long and genuine. Over the next few years, Mark continued working with the foundation he and Clara co-founded. Jake became the operations lead, organizing programs from tutoring to sports leagues. Emma grew up watching it all, absorbing every lesson about compassion, effort, and service. By the time Mark turned 68, the once lonely millionaire had built more than a center. He'd built a legacy. Emma, now in her 20s, took over the foundation's leadership. She expanded it citywide, launching new centers in underfunded neighborhoods, focusing on education, job training, and family support. She was sharp, kind, and fearless, everything her father and uncle had hoped she'd be. One warm spring afternoon, Mark sat on a bench outside the original Oak Ridge Center, now renamed Taylor Family Community Hall. Clara sat beside him, her hand gently wrapped around his. "You ever think about how it all started?" she asked. Mark smiled, eyes following a group of kids racing toward the playground. "Every day." He thought about Emma's voice on that Sunday morning, about Jake opening the door, about burgers, busted walls, and second chances, and as the breeze stirred around him, carrying the sound of laughter and new beginnings, Mark Taylor knew this wasn't just a happy ending, it was the life he was always meant to live. If this story touched your heart, I'd love to hear from you. What part of Mark and Jake's journey stayed with you the most? Was it the innocence of Emma's words, the moment the brothers reunited, or perhaps the transformation of a man who thought he had everything, only to realize that real wealth comes from love, family, and giving back? Your voice matters here. Share your thoughts in the comments, whether it's a personal story, a feeling, or even just where in the world you're watching from. It's incredible to see how stories like this connect us across distances, languages, and experiences. And if this story reminded you of someone, reach out to them. Sometimes all it takes is one message to start healing. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell, because tomorrow we'll bring you another heartfelt journey. Maybe it'll be one that helps you reflect, or even inspires you, to take a step towards someone you've lost touch with. Thank you for watching, for feeling, and for being part of this community. We're more than just stories. We're people learning, growing, and healing together.